Apologetics Australia. In this video, we'll be refuting Pauline Hanson of the right-wing party of Australia.
You have no doubt heard by now that we were going to have a terrorist attack on Australian soil. Of all days, Christmas Day. I listened to the Prime Minister's interview this morning. It was weak, it was pathetic, it did not give me the security or the feeling of I was safe in my own country. To tell me we are a multicultural country, we should get on with our lives, we shouldn't let these people put fear into us, is a load of BS.
Now, isn't it interesting that Miss Pauline Hanson says there was a terror plot? She's right about it. It was true, there was a terror plot. Apparently, there were a few suspects that were taken in during this Christmas break in Australia. But just because there was a terror plot, it doesn't mean that there was a terror plot. These people haven't even been given a day in court to even prove their innocence. So to jump on your bandwagon to assume that these people were really plotting is just bogus. You're actually innocent until you're proven guilty. That's the Australian system and that's the Australian law. So she's basically using a fear-mongering tactic during Christmas to allude to the fact that these people were already guilty of their crimes. Now, what Miss Pauline Hanson does not mention is that there were also terror plots done by non-Muslims. Yes, non-Muslims planned a terrorist attack as well, but Miss Pauline Hanson didn't mention that during her Christmas rant. No. Listen to the link below. I'll post the video link, and you will see for yourself that a church was targeted by, yes, a white racist like Miss Pauline Hanson. A church was targeted because this church had strong values against abortion and things like this, and a church was targeted by a terrorist attack. And guess what? No PM spoke against it. No media outlet turned around and called this a terrorist attack when it had terrorist affiliated actions. Here you go. The article is mentioned by 7 News. ACL car bomb, not religious or political, apparently motivated. Look at their headlines. This is by 7 News. Although the Christian group has actually said in their statement that they were targeted because they were threatened previously and they had some strong views against, I think, homosexuality or things such as abortions. And the article can be found here. You can read the whole link where a man drove into the church using gas canisters to blow it up. But you know what? This news did not make it on the Pauline Hanson propaganda. Let's see what happened also in Australia that Miss Pauline Hanson didn't see. And you can go to the Facebook page Islamophobia Watch Australia, where we have uploaded many of the incidents where a hijabi woman was assaulted as bystanders watched. This young man not only punched her repeatedly in the face, but follows her when she leaves and does it more. You can actually see it here. Let's see what else happened in Australia. Man charged over alleged beer bottle assault on a Muslim woman. And the article can again be found at the Islamophobia Watch Australia website. And you will see how he tried to beat her up and broke a bottle over her head. And that is also documented, not documented so on the Miss Pauline Hanson propaganda show. Have a look at this. We have even Australian Patriot members who actually tried to plot a terrorist attack. You can see it in the Facebook comments under Agents of Diversity, Islamophobia Watch. You can see Lakemba Mosque is the first target. He's actually trying to target Lakemba Mosque as his first target. He writes, "I have had enough. Patriots are jailed for nothing and Muslim terrorists are given bail." He says, quote, "I'm your homegrown terrorists. All Islamic compounds need to be removed. If the Australian weak government won't remove them, then the people will. So look, this man has incited violence, terrorism, but it's not taken up by the AFP or the Australian Intelligence Agency to inquire. So if this person was a Muslim, his house would be raided, his family would be raided, everything would be confiscated, he'd lose his job, he'd be thrown in jail, complete interrogation. But you see the non-Muslims, it's okay. You don't hear that in the news, but there are so many plots made by them, but you don't hear it on the Pauline Hanson agenda. Nor on mainstream media, nor does the police even speak of it. Here we go. You see another article, a Muslim woman being bullied and so forth. So this is a regular basis what Muslims face here in Australia. Here you go. An Australian Muslim group has sent abusive Christmas cards covered in pig fat. You know, Miss Pauline Hanson gets upset when she receives a Vegemite which has halal written on it. But you see how the Australian supporters of Miss Pauline Hanson are sending abusive messages to Muslims. So, but that again doesn't make it on the Pauline Hanson propaganda page. And of course, how many recent fires have we heard? This mosque get burnt, that mosque get burnt. An Islamic community centre in Fawkner has been badly damaged in a suspicious fire. And, you know, we've seen mosques get burnt in Geelong, which also happened over the course of this year. So constant fires and damages against mosques. But again, this isn't mentioned on the Pauline Hanson propaganda machine. You know, Miss Pauline Hanson says Muslims come here to offend non-Muslims. But as you can see, again, we see in Bankstown, Lakemba, horrible. Some anonymous bigot thought it would be appropriate to offend Muslims by placing bacon rations on a Muslim prayer mat inside the public prayer room in Bankstown Hospital. And you can see the picture here where they've put bacon rations inside the mosque prayer room. So there you have it.
Me, the security or the feeling of I was safe in my own country. To tell me we are a multicultural country, we should get on with our lives, we shouldn't let these people put fear into us. It's a load of BS. People are in fear.
Pauline, you're actually putting fear into the people's hearts of what some minorities do, and you want to generalize and put fear into the rest of the people in society, and you want to dramatize it as if that the rest of the Muslims are guilty for some of the crimes and the plots and plans of a minority radicalized group. Do you understand that you are no better than the fear of the extremists who put into this country, than the fear you actually create and cause more disunity by making it bigger than it is, by assuming that all Muslims make taqiyya and lies, and you'll see in the rest of her video the double standards and the hypocrisy.
Yeah, because it's happening. What do you tell the families of the 4 terrorist attacks that have already happened? They've lost their loved ones. We were lucky to have this foiled. This isn't the first time it's been foiled. This is the...
Now, what do you tell all of the Muslim families that they have been victims of our Australian government who have been bombarding the Syrian people of Aleppo along with its coalition forces, who have actually brought or helped instigate terrorism to come to this country? Now, isn't it interesting that if a Muslim tries to justify this, then he is called a terrorist sympathizer? Isn't it ironic? You know, Asadullah Ali Andalusi, Muslim apologist, explains this beautifully. He quotes, an Islamophobe says, when you try to explain that terrorism is caused by the West invading, bombing and sanctioning Muslim nations, you are justifying terrorism. Me? Oh, you mean like when you try to explain why it was necessary to bomb Nagasaki and Hiroshima? And an Islamophobe will say, that's not fair. Here's another quote. Islamophobes say Muslims are obligated to kill and subjugate infidels if they don't convert to Islam. Me? But aren't your countries the ones invading, bombing and killing innocent Muslims across the world? An Islamophobe says, that's because you don't want to be like us. Now, isn't that the irony?
Attacks that have already happened. They've lost their loved ones. We were lucky to have this foiled. This isn't the first time it's been foiled. This is...
Actually, Miss Pauline Hanson, we're absolutely lucky that we've been invading and bombing countries for the last 20 odd years, that we only had a handful of terrorist attacks happen in this country. I think that's pretty good deal. I mean, can you imagine if we started bombing China and Korea and bombing the shit out of these people, and then we only had, out of 30 years of bombing them, we only had about 5 terrorist attacks by the Chinese in this country. I think that's a pretty good deal, if you ask me. I mean, our government and their policies are working pretty hard in tackling terrorism, which is pretty good, if you ask me.
We were lucky to have this foiled. This isn't the first time it's been foiled. This is the 12th time. So they will keep plotting. Until we come in with strong laws and legislation that says we don't want these people of Islamic belief and radicalised in our country. Ban the burqa, stop the building of further mosques, have an inquiry into Islam, that it is a political ideology, stop Sharia law.
Now, interesting, she says stop Muslims into this country, but the actual terror suspects that are apparently going into trial for the alleged terror plot, they're actually born Muslims in this country. They're not immigrants from another country to this country. So again, her fallacy is just incoherent and she's wrong. Now let's go back to what she says.
Until we come in with strong laws and legislation that says we don't want these people of Islamic belief and radicalised in our country.
Did you understand her Islamophobic tone? Now, she's not saying we don't want terrorists in this country. She's saying we don't want Muslims in this country. Did you notice how she said we don't want Muslims and radicalized in this country? So you understand that she no longer even wants the moderate Muslims in this country. You understand how you're labeled as a bigoted, hating, redneck, Islamophobe that you are? You're a bogan and you are an Islamophobe. And this is why people don't like you, Miss Hanson, because you are the epic of what a racist looks like. You are the epic of what an Islamophobe looks like. There are too many contradictions in your statement.
Ban the burqa, stop the building of further mosques, have an inquiry into Islam.
Okay, what's the ban the burqa got to do with terrorism? Do you see these terrorists running around with a burqa on their heads, blowing up churches or parliamentary offices? I mean, we never had a terrorist attack here foiled in this country where a terrorist put on a burqa and started randomly shooting people. So this is the fear-mongering that she's creating. It's not an agenda against terrorism. It's basically an agenda against Islam. She doesn't want anything that is identified of being Islamic in this country. She's a clear xenophobic hater of Islam. That's basically it. This is why she'll say even ban further mosques of being created in this country.
That it is a political ideology, stop Sharia law, halal certification.
She says stop Sharia law. There is not a single Sharia law in this country. Okay, Muslims they may practice elements of Sharia law amongst themselves in their private lives, like, not eating halal and things like that. But Sharia law is not imposed on non-Muslims in this country. There is no such thing as a Sharia law parliamentary judicial system through our parliamentary system. There is no such thing. But she's saying stop Sharia law as if Sharia law exists in this country enforced against non-Muslims. There is no such a thing. So why is she even discussing Sharia law? Amazing.
Make it this place a place they don't want to be. If they want to live by these laws, their way of life, go back to a Muslim country, not here in Australia. They will continue their attacks of violence.
Did you notice the contradiction in her statement? This country actually allows freedom of religion, right? And if we're not allowed to practice our religion in this country, then you're no better than some of those extreme Muslim countries who actually ban maybe Christianity. What would you say? You'll say, oh, look at that religion. It doesn't tolerate another person's faith and so forth. You'd criticize that, wouldn't you? But where is the freedom of speech and freedom to practice religion when you're starting to put bans and regulations against Muslims by telling them they can't even have no more mosques in this country? What the hell is that? And here's another interesting point to consider. She identifies herself as a Christian. When the Christian pedophile cases took place in Australia, how many national inquiries there were against the Catholic Church? When did Miss Pauline Hanson, the hypocrite-faced, double-faced Christian hypocrite, munafiq, when did she even once call for the ban and the closure and no more Catholic churches to be built in this country? Why? When how many Catholic churches and schools were caught under raping children? How many? So why isn't there a national inquiry into closing those churches and closing those schools that have raped children since the early 1900s? Why doesn't she put a single statement, if she's fair and not biased, to close down these churches and these schools and organizations that have infiltrated raping children for so many years? Because she's a double-faced hypocrite.
Violence and hatred towards us. They will tell their lies, which is called taqiyya.
Now here's a great memo from, again, Asadullah Ali. I don't remember exactly the quote, but it goes something like this regarding taqiyya. An Islamophobe will say, Muslims lie in order to spread Islam. Me, Muslim radicals wish to kill infidels. Islamophobe, Muslim is telling the truth. Me, taqiyya. You see? Miss Hanson actually believes in the Bible, and is taqiyya even taught in her own Bible. Taqiyya simply means concealment. It isn't you need to lie to spread Islam and so forth. This is just a hoax. But let's see what Mark chapter 8 verses 29 to 30 says. Jesus tells disciples, he strictly forbids them to not tell anyone that he met the disciples. So this, Jesus, he goes on, he meets the disciples, he speaks to them and so forth. This is in Mark 8, 29, 30. And when Jesus meets them, this is after the supposed crucifixion, he warns these two disciples not to tell anyone that they met Jesus. So in fact, Jesus taught taqiyya in Mark 8, 29, 30. So suppose somebody comes up to these two disciples and says, look, who was that man you were talking to? What was his name and so forth. They can conceal this, which is part of taqiyya. So even Miss Pauline Hanson's own Bible, we need to educate her that taqiyya is taught in her Bible. This is concealment, but this concealment has nothing to do to lie to Muslims, non-Muslims, Islam completely prohibits lying to non-Muslims unless it is in the case where your life is threatened and in danger. This is when it is permissible to lie to protect your life. For example, if, a Islamophobe tries to come to my house and kill me and my family, and tries to burn my house just like they burn our mosques, if he asks if I'm in that house, if he asks one of my members, if I supposedly wanted to hide in one of those rooms, in one of those closets and an Islamophobe was asking if there was anyone else in the house, my family could lie to that criminal and say, no, there's no one in his house. Just like if Hitler and his countrymen, his foot soldiers, wanted to come out to a home where there was a Jew hiding in that home, then the people who own that home, who accompanied that home, they could lie and say that we're not keeping any Jews in this house. There's no one hiding in the basement. This lie is permissible to protect the Jews who are seeking asylum in that home from the German soldiers coming in there to kill these people. So this sort of lie is actually accepted in secularism and Western nations and amongst Christians. So I don't see why this is a problem when taqiyya is then critiqued in Islam. It makes no sense. Taqiyya is there to put safety in people. So if a criminal tries to come into your home to kill you, or if a Nazi soldier is trying to come in and kill a Jew, which is hiding in your home, you could tell that Nazi soldier, look, there's no one in this home, when in fact there is. This is part of taqiyya, to protect someone from being killed and so forth. Under no other circumstances can a Muslim lie, right? You can only lie to help a person against a harm or someone trying to actually kill him and so forth. There are other methods of taqiyya too, but it is not what the Islamophobes suggest, such as Islam is lying. It's just like a lying agent, claiming that they're not terrorists, but really they are terrorists and so forth. This is just a propaganda game by the Pauline Hanson factory. The interesting thing is we have Christian missionary groups in Saudi Arabia and places like Pakistan who are dressing up as Muslims, lying like they are Muslims, in order to spread Christianity to the rest of the world. This is documented. So it's actually your Christian missionary brothers who are writing Quran on the front page of their Bibles, and inside the actual book, it's all biblical verses. It has nothing to do with the Quran. So these tactics and taqiyya is actually practiced by your Christian missionaries in those Muslim countries where they think that they are being oppressed and so forth, and they do it under the cover. Why? Because they feel that they are endangered of being killed for propagating Christianity. So we don't see Miss Pauline Hanson talking about that type of taqiyya in those Muslim countries where the Christian missionaries are practicing taqiyya.
Bluff us and fool us. Not every Muslim is a terrorist, but most of the terrorist attacks across the world are from Muslims.
Please visit my Facebook page. We have documented an archive of information of non-Muslims who have committed terrorism. You can go have a list from many people such as Dylan Roof, Thomas Mehr to Andrej Spravik. You can see a whole list of them in our documented evidence. So it's happening on both sides. And in fact, it's happening a lot more with Islam. Why? Because we see the invasions of those countries. If the invasions of those Muslim countries weren't there, then the statistics of terrorism actually is on a decline. You'll see this post 2001, 2002, post the Iraq War. You will see how the statistics of terrorism was almost nil until the invasion of the Middle East and so forth. But of course, if you talk about the elephant in the room that these Islamophobes don't want to talk about, you're then labeled as a terrorist sympathizer because you actually speak about the root cause of the problem, which the Islamophobes don't want you to talk about, because their agenda is only to blame Islam and shift the blame to Muslims and Islam and shift the blame away from themselves.
I'm sorry if this offends you, but then again, my heart, my passion is for my country, my way of life, and protecting that. So if it offends you, actually, I really don't care.
Actually, you know what? you've actually offended not me, but you've offended all of the moderate Muslims in this country by not separating radical Islam from the moderates. You don't want both the moderates or radical Islam in this country. So yes, I am offended, and I think Australia is offended from your bigotry and your hatred that shouldn't exist in this country. I think you should pack up your bags and leave and go back to the motherland where gave birth to such a racist like yourself. Now, isn't it interesting that she says they're taking over our way of life and they're bringing their own culture and traditions here? But you see, she doesn't speak against homosexuals who want to introduce new laws into this country, such as same-sex marriages. It's never been part of the Australian culture, never been part of the Australian law and so forth. But now the homosexual community is now trying to petition and change the laws of this country. We don't see Pauline Hanson sticking up for her rights, for her Australian rights, and going against the homosexual community, but she picks on the most vulnerable people, the minority who are the Muslims, the weaker link she picks on. You see, but she doesn't say homosexuality and same-sex marriages in particular are not part of Australian culture. It's never been part of Australian culture. She doesn't say to them, why are you coming here changing our way of life, changing our culture and so forth. She speaks nothing about that. But laws are meant, introduction of laws always come in and out and so forth. That's part of democracy. That's what makes Australia, that we can change laws and help benefit the people of this land from a diversity of cultures and faiths and so forth. That's what makes Australia, Australia, where we can unite under the one flag. But you see, she discriminates against one faith because they want to live by certain laws of Islamic laws in this country, which is part of freedom of expression, freedom of religion, and so forth. But when you do, she says, no, they're trying to change our values. But she doesn't talk about the homosexual community who want to change the values of this country and want to impose laws to suit them in the parliamentary inquiry and so forth. So why the double standards? In fact, these racist bogans come to this country. They didn't assimilate to the Aboriginal community. In fact, they shunned them, chained them up, and boycotted them and so forth and killed them. I don't see Pauline Hanson, who can actually speak the native language of this country. Can you, Miss Pauline Hanson? Can you speak the Aboriginal language? Oh, well, where was your assimilation when it came to the Aboriginal people? In fact, not only did you come here to bring your culture, you forced the Aboriginal people to learn your language, the English, the British language, which was not part of this country. Yet you forced your custom and your cultures upon the Aboriginal people. But no, you don't want to speak about that. You want to pick on the weakest link, the Muslims. Maybe that's just karma catching back at you, Miss Pauline.
So you either assimilate into our society, respect us. This is a Christian country. We have many other faiths here. We don't have the fear, we don't have the threat, we're not in fear of any other religion in this country, bar Islam. So why don't we...
Like we showed earlier, she says we don't fear any other religion or ideology and so forth. And at the beginning of this video, we just showed that Muslims are being feared by non-Muslims in this country, just as well as you fear the Muslims. In fact, we've shown that other religious organizations or ideologies are bombing your churches, threatening to kill your way of life, yet you don't speak against those organizations. So you are a hypocrite. And who exactly is threatening your way of life? I mean, when have you seen a Muslim scream Allahu Akbar in the street, running, wielding a knife, and saying, all your Western women have to wear burqas? Did we do that? No. I mean, what kind of ludicrous is that by saying we are forcing our way of life onto you? Muslims in this country are practicing their own faith amongst themselves. They're not going out and forcing their faith on anybody else. You don't see that. Where do you see that? Oh, she'll speak of Hizb ut-Tahrir coming to Australia and wanting to force Sharia law. Hizb ut-Tahrir is just another organization, not even 1% of this population. If they want to force Islam and Sharia law in this country, you have many Christian organizations wanting to force Christianity upon the rest of the world. They're just small minority organizations who are making these claims. They could be simply ignored. That's not vast majority of the Muslims. That's not even 5% of the Muslims who want Sharia in this country. But she likes to dramatize things as if Muslims, of course, she'll say, Muslims are doing secret taqiyya who are trying to enforce Sharia into... You don't even deserve Sharia. Forget Sharia, you don't even deserve it. You're corrupt enough. Allah only blesses a nation with Sharia who deserve it. You don't even deserve it. Why would you want to be under Sharia? Why would Muslims want you to be under Sharia? In fact, these people are imposing the Sharia of the Bible to the rest of the Muslim world, don't they? Don't they say Muslims need to get Sharia out of those Muslim countries and we need to go there and bring our secular liberalism and our Bible into those countries? Amazing double standards here. So you see the political game of hypocrisy. Now here's a beautiful quote by Asadullah Ali. He says, Islamophobes will often tell Muslims to go back to where they came from if you don't like living in a Western country without realizing the contradiction nature of their sentiments. Firstly, aside from the simple fact that many Muslims were born in the West and really don't have much choice to leave, Western societies often extol their own virtues of supposedly being an open to critique and change, while simultaneously being offended by anyone trying to bring about those virtues, telling them that they are not welcome in a civilized society if they disagree with the status quo. Secondly, these same individuals that are offended by the presence and ideas of Muslims tend to have little to no problem with the fact that their own governments are constantly bombing and sanctioning those countries that Muslims are being told to go back to. So no matter what Muslims do, they are being told to conform or else. In other words, the claimed virtues of open critique and change are in reality projections of an imperialistic mentality. Islamophobes do not fear the imposition of Sharia. What they fear are Muslims. Not where you came from if you don't like living in a Western country without realizing the contradiction nature of their sentiments. So no matter what Muslims do, they conform being told to conform or else. In other words, the claimed virtues of open critique and change are in reality projections of an imperialistic mentality. Islamophobes do not fear the imposition of Sharia. What they fear are Muslims not willing to be imposed upon. Slave masters are always wary of their slaves, even when they are clasped in the irons.
You are not welcome here with your thoughts of hatred towards us as a nation. So those people who are of the Muslim faith that are peaceful and loving, please stand beside me and say, we do not want the radicals here. Dob them in, get rid of them, and don't have them here. So I'm saying to Peter Dutton now, stop.
Not radical. So she doesn't want both the moderate or the radicals to come into this country, but then she says, I want Muslims to stand beside me. I mean, listen to the hypocrisy in this woman's voice.
Do not bring any more Syrian refugees into Australia. We don't need them. We don't want them. And to everyone out there, please have a very Merry Christmas, and I hope it's very safe for you.
Oh, you better hope it's extremely safe, guys. please, just don't fear the Muslims. Fear the Muslims. Oh man, this is just, hang on, I just gotta cry because it's just so emotional. We're being attacked left, right and centre. Oh, come on, let's put the fear campaign up high, guys. Come on, we haven't had a terrorist attack for a very long time in this country. Let's put the fear mongering very high. Please keep safe during Merry Christmas. I mean, I wish you all the best. I mean, she really forgot to shed a tear of emotion at the end. That's the only thing that was missing in her whole conversation.